I'm very honored to be able to give this shiur in the memory of the late Eric Samson, who we all know was a tremendous about stalker and a very special Jew, and somebody who is very close to all of our hearts. I especially thank Stephen and Frankie and the rest of the Samson Mishpacha for giving me the honor of being able to teach a little Torah together in his memory, and these words should be an aliyah for his precious neshama. The Mishna in Pirkei Avot is the Mishna which I was asked to speak about. Is Mishna in Pirkei Avot, in the first parak of the Mishna yahrzeit, the 17th Mishna, which says, Shimon b'noi Oimel, Shimon, who was the son of Rabbi Gamliel, said, Kol yamai gadalti ben chachomim, that all of my days I grew up amongst the sages, v'lo matzasi leguf tov v'leshtiko, and I've never found anything better for the body but then silence. V'lo hamidrush hu ha'ikar ela ma'isa, and the learning is not the most important factor, but rather the deed. If a person overspeaks, a person speaks too much, in its wake, this brings sin. So on a very simple level, let's addressing the second part of the Mishnah first, that when the Mishnah says that the medrash, the learning, is not the essential part, but rather the ma'aseh, we understand that theory is one thing, but actually fulfilling the Torah is something else, and that the essence of Torah is that it has to be fulfilled. It's something which requires action, and that deeds speak louder than words. That if one overspeaks, so this brings in its wake sin. So this is also obvious. We understand, well, obviously, at least on a simple level, we understand that this means that when a person will overspeak, empty vessels make the most noise. The person will overspeak, and this ultimately will very often bring to saying things which are inappropriate and things which might belittle others or might denigrate others. And of course, this is a great, great priority in our Torah, and that is that a person should avoid forbidden speech, should avoid lashon hara, etc. The first part of the Mishnah, which says, that he said, Rabbi Shimon said, I never found anything better for the body than silence, is an amazing idea. We understand that on a very simple level, this means that a person should guard his tongue, as we just mentioned. That a person should guard his tongue from speaking evil. We have that prohibition of rechilus, of lashon hara, of not speaking badly of our neighbors, of not speaking badly of anybody, of always looking for the good and saying good and speaking of good, and if not having and rather saying nothing at all than saying anything negative about another Jew or another person. And this is why he said that if a person will just keep his mouth shut, he manages to keep himself away from a lot of negativity. He's going to be able to achieve a lot of good just by simply keeping quiet. But there's a much deeper idea over here. And that is which the Gemara says, that mila besela mishtoike b'shtayin, which means that a word is worth one, silence is worth two. Now, Benayahu, what is the statement? What does the statement mean? There's a very, very beautiful insight of the Benayahu. The Benayahu is the Perush of the Ben Ish Chai, is the explanation of the Ben Ish Chai. The Ben Ish Chai, who was one of the very, very great early commentaries that we have on many parts of the Torah, in many places of the Torah, and in Halacha. And the Ben Ish Chai says that all of these cryptic statements that we find in our Gemara, like this one, which says a seller, that a milah b'seller, that a word is worth one coin, is worth $1, so to speak. And if a word is worth one, silence is worth two. So he says this is a melitza, or these melitzos, these expressions are derived from an early moshel, or really they're derived from an early parable, from a story, from a story which preceded this saying. All of these sayings, these pithy sayings, which are brought down in our Chazal, which are mentioned in our Gemara, that our sages so eloquently stated, and sometimes very cryptically, all really have a deeper meaning. That there's a much deeper meaning, and that they all are derived from a mashal, all derived from a story which happened, which is part of our tradition. So he says, what's the story? The story that preceded this statement is the story that the Gemara, that our Medrash relates, that our Chazal, that our sages relate, that there was a king, and he said to two of his subjects, if you will, whatever you will ask, whatever one of you will ask, I will grant, I will give you, and the one who keeps silent, I will give double. So this presented itself with a challenge. Of course, both of these guys are eyeing each other out, deciding who's going to blink first, who's going to be the one to ask first. Certainly I would like double, but on the other hand, a bird on the hand is worth two in the bush, as they say. So that it's better if I could already, if I'll chaperayim, and I'll take now what I'm entitled to, when the king's going to give it to me now. So I've got it, and it can be a fortune. Let's ask for $1 billion. Nothing wrong with that. And, who needs two? Although we know, of course, that human nature is not such, but human nature is always going to, as our Chazal tell us, that if a person has 100, he's always looking for 200, he really desires 200, he's not going to give up at that point, and he's not going to be satisfied. But nevertheless, there is, of course, the obvious logic that the king may change his mind, the king may die. Who says that the offer is going to last forever? The offer's on the table. Let's chaperayim. So within a little while, the one guy blinks, so to speak, and he asks for 1,000 zehuvim, 1,000 zehuvim, his $1 billion. And the other guy sits quietly by, and the king grants this person his 1,000 zehuvim, he gives him, and 3 days later, he gives the other guy the 2,000 zehuvim. That really is the story. That's the entire story. That's the entire mashal. And on this, the Benayahu says that's what the Gemara means, where the Gemara says, Mila b'selah mishtoika b'trein, that a word is worth a seller, one coin, and silence is worth two. It comes from this story. What is the meaning of this story? What really is the meaning of the story? Benayahu himself actually explains, based on a pasuk in Mishna, based on a pasuk in Proverbs, that there is such an idea that the person who is prepared to wait, the person who's prepared to exercise patience, the person who really has a trust, a deep trust in Hashem, that the king will always deliver. In the long run, that person is going to benefit. That person is actually going to win, so to speak, in the long run. The idea being that the person who is a tzal ayin, person who feels that he has to chap, that if I don't take the opportunity now, if I don't grab what is on the table, then there will be nothing left for me thereafter. That really bespeaks the eternal quest of the human soul for material possessions. And that there's never really enough. We never really can ever have enough. That is the nature of the human being. As I mentioned, that a yeshlo mana roitz matayim, when one has 100, he wants 200. This is the eternal quest, the eternal search of the human soul. The human soul in its natural state really does not belong in this world. And therefore, and comes from a much higher, elevated place. And therefore is never truly satisfied in this world. So the person is always looking for more. And no matter how much we will achieve, no matter how much we'll have, no matter how many possessions we have, no matter how much we have in the bank, we always want double that. We're always looking for more than that. This does not suffice, no matter how much a person will have. And we know, as is the case in many, many instances, that the person has really enough. They really have enough for himself and his children, his children's children, to live very comfortably for the rest of their lives. But this never really proves to be enough. And one of the lessons that emerges from this is that really a person has to work very hard on the trait of silence. Silence in this regard doesn't mean silence necessarily in the physical sense of keeping one's mouth shut. But silence means a quietness of the soul. It means a quietness of the soul, that the person quiets his soul and learns to be satisfied with what he's got. We know that even though, Taka, it's true that a person has this eternal quest for material possessions, and that never ceases, that's an ongoing, boiling element within his soul. But Chazal tell us, that who is, in this very same Pirkei Avot, it states in another Mishna, that who is truly wealthy, the person who is happy with his lot. So we see that such a state of mind is possible, that if a person will work on the idea of being satisfied, of being grateful for what he has, and happy with his lot, happy with that which Hashem has bestowed upon him in this world, that is attainable. That peace of mind, that peace of soul, that quieting of the soul is possible. If a milah is worth one, if a word is worth one, asking for what I want is worth one, silence, the ability to trust in Hashem absolutely, and to be satisfied absolutely with that which Hashem provides me with, is worth two, is worth double, is of much greater value. There is much greater value in the ability of a person to simply accept that which Hashem has bestows upon us, and to live with a satisfaction that everything that Hashem has given me, I'm satisfied with. This is not to say that a person should not have ambition. We know very clearly, we understand, we know that there was a very great teacher in our Jewish tradition and our Jewish history, that by the name of Rabbi Yisrael Salanta, the founder of the Muslim movement, and that Rabbi Yisrael Salanta famously composed, his whole emphasis in life was character development, that a person should develop his soul, should develop his personality, should develop his traits. And Rabbi Yisrael famously had a very great 13 principles, character traits that encapsulates all that a person should strive for. And over there, one of those is shtika, one of those is silence, one of those is keeping quiet, and in a deeper level, this idea which we've expressed, that a person has a deep confidence in Hashem, and a trust in Hashem, and a satisfaction with his lot. On the other hand, Rabbi Yisrael Salanta speaks of zrizus, of alacrity, and of charitzus, which means a determination. That when a person says, and he says clearly, this is a positive trait, that a person has ambition, that a person wants to achieve, that a person decides what he wants to achieve and doesn't give up until he achieves it. That is not a contradiction to the fact that the person is entirely accepting of everything that Hashem bestows upon him. And so this should be a very, very powerful lesson for all of us that we learn from Pirkei Avot over here. I will finish with this marshal, an amazing marshal, that the Chofetz Chaim quotes a great medrash. That the medrash says the following: that there was a guy gets summons to the king, and he prepares himself that he's going to meet the king, but he knows that if the king calls him, this means trouble. It's not something that anybody looks forward to. So he goes to his closest friend and says to his friend, listen, will you come with me to represent me before the king? Let us go together and you'll represent me. And this friend refuses. He says, no, I'm sorry, I can't. I'm scared. I'm not prepared. I can't go with you. He's a bit disappointed. He goes to his next friend, the friend that he wasn't so close to. And the friend says, look, I'll come with you. I'll come with you to the palace, but I'm not prepared to walk into the palace. I'm not prepared to come all the way in. And the third, he's a little disappointed. He goes to the third friend. The third friend says, and this friend was really just an acquaintance, somebody that he's not so close to, somebody that doesn't have such a connection with. This guy says, yeah, sure, I'll come with you. And he goes with him, and he goes in with him, and he represents him, and he speaks on his behalf, and he gets him off the hook. What's the nimshal? What is this telling us? What is this all about? So the Medrash explains that our existence in this world is only a temporary existence. Who's our closest friend? That which we are most attached to? Our physical possessions. That's the thing that we are most attached to in this world. That's the reality of the human being, of the human condition. That, when the person is called to the king at the end of 120 years and he has to face his maker, has to meet his maker, so those possessions, they don't even leave the house. They don't come with a person anywhere. They don't accompany him at all. The next friend that he's not as close to is his friends and his family. His family and his friends, putting them in that order. His family and his friends. His family who's very attached to him. His friends who he's attached to. And they will come with him. They'll come with him. They'll accompany him to the grave. They'll accompany him to the burial place. But they're not coming with him all the way. They stop over there. They've got their own lives to lead. They've got their own future ahead of them. The friend that he was, the acquaintance, so to speak, that he had a perhaps casual relationship with, we can't entirely connect with spirituality. Our Torah and our mitzvahs are something which we have a relationship with, but usually not of great intensity, because this is something very spiritual and something which we can't really relate to so easily in this world. Those are the things that accompany him all the way. Those are the kings that come with him. That's the only thing that accompanies him all the way to the king. Those are our good deeds. Those are the Torah that we learned. Those are the tzedakah that we gave. That is the only thing that ultimately attaches itself to the soul and is really the essence of the soul, and that comes all the way with a person to his eternal resting place. And so we say all of these words and this lesson as a tribute to and as an aliyah for the neshama of the late Eric, who, as I said, we all held in such high regard, and that these words really should be an aliyah for his neshama. And we know that Baruch Hashem, he was zoiche, he did merit, that he was a person who realized the importance of the fact that he was able to share of his wealth, able to share of his resources, and all for a very great good, in a wonderful way, in a wonderful spirit of tzedakah, such that those good deeds, that all of that Torah that he supported, and all of that, those mitzvahs that he fulfilled, all of that tzedakah that he fulfilled, accompanies him to that eternal abode. And therefore we know, we have great, great confidence that his neshama continues to gain a great aliyah from the results, from the totzot, from the results of all of those spiritual investments of Torah and tefillah and tzedakah that he gave, that he was involved with, and that his family continues to fulfill. The family is the fulfillment of the family continuing in his footsteps. Really, we know continues to create a tremendous light for his neshama in its eternal resting place. And we wish the family much, much bracha and consolation. And it has been a wonderful opportunity. I very much treasure the great honor of being able to be part of this great initiative and of being able to share these words of Torah with you.